Welcome to The Story Tinker, a Webtoons and Witcher podcast for superfans with scene-by-scene analysis. Featuring sharp co-hosts for a fuller picture, we dive deep into character psychology, relationships, and theories. We'd love it if you could like, subscribe, comment, and rate us on all podcast platforms and social media. For bonus content, you can support The Story Tinker on Patreon. Let's begin. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Tiger Pops. And today we are here with Hope and Patty doing episode 5. Hope and Patty, let's hear your introduction.
Hi, I'm Hope. I am an avid lover of 𝗦𝘂𝗶𝗱𝗆. I am probably older than I want to be, but younger than I feel. I've been an incredible fan of Webtoons for a while, and when 𝗦𝘂𝗶𝗆𝗆 was introduced, I devoured it right away. I'm a mom and a former legal assistant. I live in Maryland. I love reading and art. I paint. I write.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hope, and thanks for joining us today.
It's
and
my
Patty,
pleasure.
You've been on before, so let's hear from you again.
All right. Hi, all. I'm Patty, and I have been on the podcast before, so I'm excited to be here again. Episode 5 is one of my favorite episodes, so I'm excited to dissect this. I didn't mention this last time, but I live in the state of Oklahoma, and I am 35, married, have 2 fur babies, and that's about it. In terms of things I like to do for fun, obviously, like 𝗦𝘂𝗶𝗆𝗆 is part of my life now. And, I enjoy lots of different Webtoons now, but I was definitely late to the Webtoon game. Avid concert goer, love to listen to music. You all know that I have a thing for my playlists on Spotify, but that's the kind of stuff that I do in my free time. I love to read, I love to write, and that's pretty much all you need to know about me.
Thank you, Patty. Yeah, and I've introduced myself before, but Mindy, just turned 31, 2 kids, married, doing an MBA in the business world, and also definitely a creative person at heart. So art, writing, I write poetry, sing music, compose music, all that stuff. And 𝗦𝘂𝗶𝗆𝗆 is definitely taken over like the creative side of my life right now. But we're good. So episode 5, we're so excited to get into this. So episode 5 right now. So we walk in, this is our first introduction to Tora's life. I mean, it's not our first introduction, but it's where we see it in person. So it starts out, we see this assembly, this meeting in a very posh room, very elegant, classic furniture. Everybody is wearing suits, around a big wooden table, very formal. And the center is on this guy who we first see with his back turned to us. He's wearing, like a more fancy suit than everybody else. He has some alcohol in his hand. He's got this gorgeous woman, scantily dressed at his side. Obviously, what's the word again? Eye candy or like arm candy?
Yes, definitely arm candy.
Arm candy.
Yeah. So, I mean, right away, this gives us an indication, like she's not there necessarily for her personality or her contributions other than the physical. That's my suspicions. And I'm kind of curious what we'll see
there to accent him.
Right. Yeah, it's all about him.
Yep.
And
indeed. I also find it interesting that at first we don't really get a face on her until later on when she's speaking in the episode, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Right. And that's like a sign, like, is her personality, is her face important? Is her individuality important? So, she's just a pretty body.
Yep.
I also find it's really interesting, and I'll talk a little bit about this as we get further along in the episode. But I found it really interesting, the warm tone of the colors in here. And it struck me because usually when Lily is depicting something that's dark or sinister, that it's more blue toned or green toned.
Yeah, this is really warm, and it is interesting to see. You're right. It has the warm autumn tones.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm wondering, like, is that the 𝗪𝗪𝗱 facade, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Because like when Tora pops in, he kicks the door open, he tosses the dudes in, And then we see behind him, if you look behind the door, just looking at the color tones back there, it just really struck me the second time around reading this. And I was like, oh, that's the dark underbelly. This is all a facade.
Yep. And we know when Poppy looks up the 𝗏𝗏𝗱 organization a little bit later, she doesn't find any negative information, really. She sees mostly positive information because they put up a front of this, legit organization.
Right.
Well, because that boardroom looks just like the law firm I worked at.
Mm-hmm.
That looks like a conference room when we've had meetings.
Yep, and everybody's dressed in suits.
Yeah, I mean, that's their facade.
And
definitely,
like when Tora comes in, so Tora is wearing street clothes and he's all covered in blood and he's sweating. And this guy, you see this guy slamming his hand down on the table with these fancy rings and yelling at him, Tora. And, why are you barging in dressed like that? Show some respect to clan members. So, this is, we see that like everybody's expected to show up dressed a certain way and with respect. And if they don't show that respect, they get addressed and, potentially punished.
Yeah, and I think it also shows, because I know that for Tora this is more of an act of rebellion for him, but also I think it sets him apart from the other clan members. Like, yes, he's part of the clan, but you can tell immediately with the way that he's treated and the disrespect that he is shown, even though the work that he does is so, quote, pivotal to clan business, that they all look at him, like, look at their faces when he enters. Like, you've got background freaking out. You've got Shark and Claude just giving him, the stink eye.
Look at him with disdain.
Yes.
Right, which is very strange. Another thing I noticed, by the way, that I see both Martin's hand, his bracelet is a chain link, and then the woman has chains around her neck and her arms as well, which to me is just symbolic of like the chains that they're all in, being part of this clan.
Absolutely.
Right.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And Martin, of course, he calls him out and says, "What the hell are you doing? Show some respect," and calling him out.
Right. And then you see Vincent. Now you see where Tora gets treated differently. Vincent steps up and he defends Tora and he says, he doesn't mean any disrespect. I've trained him since he was a child and done rather a good job myself. So like we're already, with this pose that he's giving us, arms thrown back, leg up, very relaxed, very like dominant pose, having the alcohol in his hand, clearly not intimidated or by anything, at least in this episode. And so you're already like our hackles are up. What kind of training did he give him? Did a man like this give him?
Yes.
Yeah, you really have to wonder. And just the smug look of indifference on Vincent's face.
Well, it's almost
like this is a Tuesday for him.
It's almost like Vincent is amused by it all. He enjoys seeing all the other men put out by Tora, and he enjoys seeing Tora rattle them. And then he stands up and says, "Oh, it's fine. I raised Tora to be like this. In fact, he's my favorite creation."
Right.
Yeah. So it's where he can take ownership and he can, claim that he's the reason that Tora is this way and that he's done a good job. Everything is in relationship to Vincent's ego.
It's all manipulation and control and power. It's ultimate narcissism. Everything relates back to him.
Right. Yep. We see this right away. So Vincent asks, "Hey, gentlemen, tell me what's going on here." And Tora is showing us his violence right away. He kicks the purple here dude, purple-ish, purple gray, and, kicks him in the face, causes him to bleed. And Vincent's, like, "Don't kill them all before I hear what they have to say," which is showing you, Tora generally does kill people for him. That's what it seems like.
Yeah. And I mean, look at his eyes here. Like the whole time that Tora has stepped into this room, his eyes just look, like he's dead inside, like he's checked out.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that a lot, throughout the episodes when he is in that work mode. you know, his facial expressions go almost blank, as if he's like, okay, I'm on autopilot right now. I mean, he's still covered in these guys' blood. And he's standing right next to his boss, who, you know, we can glean a little bit that he and his boss don't have the best of a relationship.
Well, and when you look at Vincent, he has that malignant smile on his face, that he is just sadistically enjoying this, and meanwhile Tora looks just gutted. You know, he is not enjoying this at all. He's going through the motions because this is the role he's been forced into, clearly. And he's just doing what he's got to do. But meanwhile, Vincent is savoring this.
Yeah, that's really sick. And we see like the other clan members, even though they're not used to seeing such displays of violence in front of their eyes often, because they talk about it and they're like, I've never, have you never seen Big Bro Tora go at it before? He's a goddamn beast. So showing us that even those clan members, they might be like, they've been like paper pushers kind of people, but they're not doing the actual violence.
Right. Well, and then it also tells me, like, Smithy, he says, yeah, he's seen this before, but that every time he sees it, it's still shocking to him. And thinking about this in the context of the episodes that we've already read, when I think about this, is this piece here foreshadowing how Poppy might feel when she discovers Tora's violence? Because she's not used to that. She hasn't been exposed to that. And if she sees it out of context and out of understanding of what he might be doing, it makes me think, like, what would she say or think about that?
That is a really good point.
And then he mentions, like, now that Mr. Baltimore is involved, those two street thugs are basically done for, which, again, shows us that Vincent Baltimore is known for being merciless.
Absolutely.
Yeah, those guys are as good as dead.
Yeah. So they're defending themselves and saying, we have nothing to do with this. We've only received orders from a man named Shane. And, let's all try to remember that name, because we assume that there's something involved with that.
A hidden character.
I'm sure that'll come back up in the future.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everything.
I wonder if he's connected to one of the rival clans. I imagine he would be.
Yeah.
Right. So they're like, oh, we'll give you his contact information if you let us go. Desperate attempt at preserving their life. And Vincent flashes out. He reaches inside his suit jacket. So he has this stuff on him all the time. Within his fancy, exterior veneer of the suit, he has a murderous weapon. Again, like, outside respectable, inside disgusting.
Yeah.
And this fancy knife. So even his murder weapon is ornate and decorated and beautiful. He likes his things to be beautiful. And
I think it's interesting also that he has a knife and he doesn't have a gun. Because if you think about it, it's a much more personal weapon. And you have to get up close to whoever you're using it against. So, like you were saying earlier, Hope, that really makes me think that he is that sadistic and he does savor this kind of stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, the next panel is pretty graphic. Tora is holding down this guy's head and Vincent slits his throat while he's begging for mercy.
Yeah. I want to point out in this panel, and this is what this was the point in the series where I was like, okay, Lily is not fucking around.
Yeah.
She's not holding any stops here, because sometimes you get implied violence in comics and whatnot because of the PG-13 rating, but I was like, oh damn, she went there. And at the same time, like, one of the things that gets me a lot about this particular scene, and maybe I'm overanalyzing it, but with Tora's foot on this guy's shoulder and Vincent's down below actually doing the dirty work for once. But we see that the blood splatters on Tora's shoe. And so, it kind of gives me this idea of, again, Tora being a tool, that really Vincent is the person who is the perpetrator, but at the same time, Tora has to be the enforcer. He has to be the muscle, if you will. And that he's the one who ends up with blood on his hands rather than Vincent. Because you see further on in the later panels, and I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but like Tora's the one covered in blood. Vincent hasn't a drop on him after doing something like that. He's sitting there cleaning his knife and whatnot, casually talking about how he just killed these two guys and trying to find the notebook. But it's just interesting to me that, even though Tora was not the one who killed these two guys, that he is still the one with blood on him because of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that Vincent has the burgundy handkerchief and just happens to be able to just wipe the blood casually off his hands and tuck it away. No sign of the crime, no sign of the violence. Meanwhile, Tora's covered in it.
Yeah.
He bears the marks of it. He bears the emotional brunt of what's happening. Whereas Vincent's like, nah, no big deal. I'm a sadist.
Yeah.
I don't care who I kill. But we know Tora hates what he's doing. Tora's bearing the brunt of it. And, he's been forced into this.
Yeah, there's definitely an air of that here. And just how like calm and collected Vincent is throughout this whole scene is just chilling to me. And then again, like the further down we go and we're looking at them dragging the bodies away again, the veneer with the underbelly of like what really goes on, and that we only get an intersection between the two when it's necessary. So I found it really interesting that those two thugs, they died within the facade, but then they're very quickly dragged back into the underbelly and shoved under the rug, if you will.
Two bodies, and like the blonde one doesn't necessarily, like, we don't see anything happening to him in the panels, but we're assuming that he killed him too.
Right.
Either that or he's barely, going to be killed momentarily.
Yeah, it's not going to be that long.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Smithy throws up and he can't handle the violence. And, and one of the other clan members is like tapping him on the back. So obviously, like, this is a complicated thing because within, in general, I know I'm not like I've never read much psychology literature about the clans, gangs, etc. But within they've established this group, right? And every group has its loyalty and like the caring and concern about the group members. So the clan, they're not, they're showing unconcern to the people who are outside of their group, and they don't care about their lives. But within the group, they do show some concern for each other. At least this young man and Smithy, patting Smithy on the back. So I think that's something that it's pretty basic human psychology that the people within our group, even if it's like a murderous evil group, there is a connection between them, and then they disassociate, and anyone outside the group is unworthy of respect or regard for human life, etc.
I've heard a term, and I don't know if it's a psychological term, but it's called monkey sphere. Like basically everyone within that group is who you care about and is who is human to you and who matters to you. And everyone outside that group is irrelevant. And that is and their humanity is completely irrelevant to you. And you just don't care. And that is how people don't care about other people. And they literally only care about people like in their family or in their extended neighborhood or that kind of thing. And that is how people blind themselves to things around them. And that's probably how gangs work and things of that nature. They only care to their small unit.
Right. Yeah, it's something, I think about that a lot in terms of the genocides that occur all over the world, and like the ability to completely tone out the person in front of you and disregard them.
Yeah, it's because the term you can Google it. It's called a monkey sphere, where you just focus on your small unit, and that's all that matters, and you just check out about the other humanity around you, and it's crazy, but it's a thing that actually happens, and I've wondered about that because we have neighbors that are these really nice people, and they're super nice to us, but they have beliefs that are completely the antithesis of what we believe in. And they don't care about other people. And I'm like, how can they be so nice to us when they don't care about specific other people in the world? And it's so weird to us, that they can be so nice to us, but not care about other people in the world. And it's so strange. And I guess that's the same psychology that goes on with like people in gangs or people who don't care about like, genocides or war or those kind of behaviors.
Yeah. And I think there's a big element of survival mode in these types of groups. So, depending on the level at which you are within a gang or within a clan, or even like the military structure, which is what I'm most familiar with, you tend to you have to compartmentalize. You have to shrink your world almost just to be in that survival mode and to make it through. And so the larger world around you matters less because your plate is too full. Like, so for example, in this scene where we're talking about one clan member caring for another, they don't care about the two men that they just dragged off because, again, they are considered other.
And their act hurt them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's an us versus them kind of thing.
Right.
Okay, so now Vincent asks Tora about the notebook. And, to me, it's telling that he asked Tora about the notebook rather than, bringing it up with the rest of the clan. It indicates his reliance on Tora and his reliance only, honestly, on his knowledge of what's going on in the streets and his intelligence. I think that he recognizes he's not just, this is where he shows us that he's not just a muscle. So
yeah,
he's saying
that's very true. And I think he's doing a lot of manipulation here. What really struck me, he calls Tora son, and he's, got his arm around him and is, talking to him in a very cordial manner, which I find it's really interesting because for somebody that's, his muscle, this person that he relies on to do the dirty work, you wouldn't expect somebody like Vincent to call him son.
Right.
Well, and it's like he makes him feel so special, and it's like this. It's such a grooming behavior. You are the only man who can talk to me this way and get out alive. You're so special to me, and look how much I trust you, and look how much I rely on you. And it's like he builds him up and lets him know how special he is, and then puts all this burden on him.
Right.
Yeah, and Tora's response is and I see it very much as like a facade he puts on. He slouches away from Vincent as though he doesn't care. He starts taking out his cigarettes and smoking indoors, a sign of disrespect. And it's kind of like he wants to show that he doesn't care about Vincent and that he doesn't need him. That he's not intimidated by him.
Yep. Well, and I think I don't want to go up too far, but I think as we see is he's distancing himself from Vincent, and he's trying to make a break, or at least that's something recent.
Yeah, you can definitely tell by his body language that he's not comfortable. And I find it interesting too that it looks like Vincent kind of has him cornered. When you notice that, and you'll see this in later episodes, but the body language that Tora exhibits in front of Vincent is very like, I'm trying to keep my distance from you, and if you close in on me, I'm going to close my body language to you. Like it says very much, get away, don't touch me, kind of thing.
Right.
So in this next panel, right, so Vincent says he wanted to leave the notebook research to Martin and his boys. How do you pronounce his name? Sharsh?
Yeah, I think it's Shark.
Okay. Shark and Claude, right? And those are the two young guys next to Martin, who's maybe in his 50s. And then he asks Tora to lead to it. And then we find out that Tora is a bodyguard to Quincy, which, yeah, well, we'll learn more about Quincy later.
I can't wait for that.
I know Quincy just wants to smile on all our faces to see this.
We're all just grinning like loons.
Yes.
Yeah. Dear readers, you will get there, and we promise it will be worth it.
It'll be so worth it.
Mm-hmm. So Vincent, here again with psychological manipulation, Vincent asks Tora to stop smoking, stop killing your lungs. You might not have much regard for your life, but I need you healthy and strong. Which again, this sad that even Vincent knows that Tora doesn't care about his own life because he's not in control of his own life, right? Non-perceptive, non-caring Vincent has the acuity to realize that about Tora. Super sad. And what does Tora do? Just keeps on smoking.
He's like, nope, I don't care.
And in response to Vincent asking him to go look for the notebook, he does another power play. While he's exhaling, lifts his head up, doesn't look at Vincent in the eye, and says, "Give me a pay raise."
Yep, he's keeping it very transactional, and I think that's another way that Tora separates himself from the clan, because the rest of them might act like brothers, like they care about each other, but I get the feeling that Tora keeps to himself just based on this body language here, and like, give me a pay raise, this is a job, stop calling me son.
Right.
To you guys that the other people in the clan, other than these suits, call Tora big bro, but these suits seem disrespectful to him. But the other guys, like the street guys, say he's big
the way
bro.
that they say it is more endearing.
Yeah.
That's true. He probably, I think, Tora probably always has a heart more for the little guys and doesn't have respect for authority or for people who don't treat other people well. Right. And that he thinks people are beyond their exterior. Right. So probably the little guys who don't get respect and who get stepped on all the time, he's more compassionate to them than the big guys who can boss other people around.
And think they're so special.
So anyway, so Vincent, claps Tora on the shoulder, again, a sign of seeming affection, but contradicting the way that he treats him in general. And Tora gives him this very, again, it's deadpan look, but it's like, okay, I know you don't really care about me. Stop with your foolish and, gratuitous fake symbols of affection.
Well, it's almost like, dude, stop touching me.
Yeah, he's got the death stare on him.
Yep. And then Vincent asks him to join lunch celebration for tomorrow. He says, "I insist you join." Again, I think, reasserting his dominance and telling him to put a suit on and don't go walking around dressed like this. And how does Tora respond? Doesn't turn his face. He's about to step out of the room. "I'll think about it. I have a call to nurse." Slams the door.
He just love it.
He's not having it. He's annoyed. He wants to get the hell out of there.
Yeah, and I think it's a very delicate balance between him and Tora and Vincent, because Tora knows that Vincent does have the power, but he wants to, as much as he can, he wants to assert his own independence.
Most definitely. Yeah, it just, like we've talked about before, in the way that he dresses and the way that he carries himself, how it keeps everything very transactional between him and Vincent. And and we'll see this in later episodes, but there's a lot of dominance and power plays here, that it's kind of a tit for tat. And I think there's some sick part of Vincent that enjoys that.
Interesting. Other people just pay him lip service and do what he says, and this is somebody who actually can respond back to him.
Right, because remember he said earlier in the episode, you're the only one who can speak to me like that and still be alive. So that tells me that Vincent knows what Tora is worth to him. But that I think there's some part of him that enjoys that sparring piece, because nobody else does that with him. You can tell.
Right. And the blonde lady, eye candy, I don't know what her name is.
She now finally has a face.
Yeah. And it's, it's a made up face. She's beautiful as we would expect. And, she is just swirling her alcohol around nonchalantly, again, in very big contradistinction to the violence that just occurred, completely uncaring. Her alcohol is more important. And, she kind of like laughs and says, "What a difficult underling you have, darling." I don't know why anyone would call Vincent darling, but whatever.
That's it. Well, I wouldn't take that as being a sincere term of endearment. Again, she's very much arm candy. I know that there's been some talk, like, is this woman Quincy's mother or not? I'm going to say no, just based on how young she is, but also, it's not uncommon for mob leaders and gang leaders to have multiple women at their side. Like, we haven't seen anything of Mrs. Balchman, so I guess we'll find out what happened to her.
Yeah, people's parents are like a big deal in this comic.
Yeah, exactly.
So Vincent acknowledges that he's a handful, but he says that boy's loyalty to me is second to none, which I'm very curious about that statement and how much he really understands Tora.
Yeah, I don't buy that as much. I think one of the things that we have seen even in these early episodes is that Tora kind of paints himself as this guy who doesn't know much, that, oh, I'm just the muscle, or I'm just the guy who does the dirty work. And Vincent, if you do that, you make yourself less suspicious. in clans like that, because then people think you're loyal, you're the dumb loyal thug.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way to survive is to stay under the radar.
You have her saying, Tora's distancing herself from the clan affairs, and meanwhile Vincent's saying, he's so loyal to me. I think we've got that dichotomy going on, that I think Tora's got a lot more going on than anybody realizes.
Right.
He's staying under the radar, but and as we've seen with his physical behavior, his body language, he is definitely distancing himself in every way, emotionally, physically, behavior wise, and he may be Vincent may think he's loyal, but I think things are obviously changing from what they were. I think Vincent maybe a little too full of himself here.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, most definitely. His ego is clouding his judgment, and I find it's really funny that the arm candy is the one who's questioning Tora's loyalty, and Vincent is the one, he's so smug about how he trained Tora that he's like, there's no way he would betray me. There's no way that he would go behind my back. And I'm like, how dumb are you? You have no idea.
Yeah, he's blinded by his own confidence and the way he wants things to be, which probably will be his downfall. Yes.
Yep, that's his Achilles heel.
It's
and
typical narcissist.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely.
Right. Can't and would not want to be around him, serving him all the time.
Yeah.
And yeah, and you see, this last like chilling line from that scene is he just looks at the frame and says, "Any dog that goes against the orders of its owner will be shot," and the dog knows it. So that's how he views Tora. For all his building him up and saying, you're the only one who can talk to me this way and you're so special, he views him as a dog.
Right? That just kills me, because then that's how it just confirms how it's all garbage. My son, you're so special. You're the only one who can talk to me. And in the end, it's just, he's a dog.
Right. And one of the things that we talked about with a bunch of my online friends, like especially after this piece came out about him referring to Tora as a dog, that Balchaman crest on his neck, that's like a dog collar. It's like a dog tag, and it says, "I own you." And
absolutely.
And it just, oh God, it just took my levels of disgust for Vincent that much further. He's a piece of work. So kudos to Lily for creating this crazy and just totally sadistic villain. It's perfect characterization.
Yeah,
because I revolt against him.
He's a fabulous villain.
Yeah. So I think going on to the next panel, I think that from an authorial perspective, Lily did something very clever here. So we've just witnessed Tora being involved in this act of incredible brutality and violence. And I think it's pretty normal for many readers to then get disgusted by Tora and maybe, feel distant from Tora and repulsed by Tora's behavior. And this last line of Vincent just reaffirms the fact that Tora has no choice in this. And then this next flashback that we'll see Tora having gives us an understanding of why he is like this and why he continues to do this. And I think that that was something that Lily did intentionally to create sympathy for Tora and make sure that we understand that he has very little choice in his life.
Yeah. I thought it was, yeah, it really is. And if you think about it, that the next panel that it pans to is his brand new shoes covered in blood, and they're white shoes of all things. And, we see later on in the episode that he's wearing darker clothing, but I found it really interesting that, it just really demonstrates that, he could be the purest person on the inside, but he is tainted by this work that he has to do.
And even standing there with the sunlight over his, and blood speckled over him, he's wearing this white shirt and he's gazing off almost like he's dazed. And it's this vision of him where he clearly doesn't want this. And it's the symbolism of he has this light inside of him, but he's also trapped in these shadows.
Right. And he's very
Right.
alone here. Like, you can feel the loneliness in this panel.
And then he cups his face.
Yeah. He's only got himself to comfort him. Like, he has no one else to comfort him when he has to deal with this kind of stuff. And we see in those next panels where we go into the flashback mode that, again, he's alone. He has to comfort himself.
Ugh.
Yeah, and this is where it gets really, really crazy. You know, so we see
Yeah.
little baby Tora. He's I estimate he's around 5, 6, and he's stuck in this narrow cage underground, dirty, all alone, nothing there, like hard concrete. There's no food, there's no blanket, nothing. And there's these bars above him. And we hear a young Vincent telling him, "Look at all the trouble you've caused at school," which, again, any kid from a traumatized background is, of course, going to cause trouble at school. Like,
Right.
This is like, I told Hope, you know, I see like my husband's story here, sad. But yeah, of course, like there was always trouble at school because when you have your life is in havoc, you can't focus at school. And Vincent telling him, "You're going to stay there until I get back from my vacation as punishment." So like, this is just like throwing, you know, salt on his wounds, right? Not only does he seem to abuse him all the time, but now he can't go on vacation with the family. And tell him, "Before I leave, Tora boy, are you scared of being down there on your own?" This is just such evil to treat a little kid like that.
When I saw this for the first time, you know, I mean, you guys know what I do for a living, so this was really, really hard for me to read. But I think it gives us so much insight into Tora's background and why he does what he does and why he keeps himself separate. Because if he tries to show who he is, if he tries to have those feelings, you know, he'll be rejected for it at the very least and reprimanded for it at most. Because we see in these later panels, he's like, "Are you scared? Are you crying? You know, why are you hiding your face?" And then we see in that panel, little baby Tora, he's just, I mean, he's obviously bawling, but then he has to show this fierce side of himself. And he has to lie about how he's feeling and thinking. And so, you know, when I talk in my work about, you know, where, you know, one of the questions I usually will ask my clients is like, where did you learn that it was unsafe for you to feel? Where did you learn that it was unsafe for you to express how you felt? And this was that moment for Tora. He, you know, he's basically being told by Vincent, "I have no use for cowardly children. I have no use for you to cry, for you to feel. You're not allowed to do this." And it broke my soul. I'm not going to lie. This one hurt.
I come from a traumatic background. My family was pretty abusive, and in therapy, the term that I really learned was ambivalence. You know, and what he's experiencing are two very competing emotions. He's terrified, but he's telling him he's not scared. He's sobbing in fear and rejection and terror, but he's claiming and decrying and telling himself and Vincent, "I'm not scared." You know, two very competing emotions. And that it basically divides your psyche and your emotions, and you shut down. And because you can't function in two divided places. And so you shut down inside. And it's a very difficult way to live. And so he moves forward and becomes this grown man who's shut down. He goes through life in shutdown mode, you know, and if I show who I really am, if I show my true emotions, I'll be rejected. If I show who I really am, if I show what I really feel, I'll be, you know, punished. I mean, he's literally being tortured in a kennel that is made for dogs.
Like a puddle next to him, he's not being taken care of.
Right.
His clothing are dirty.
Yeah, and it kind of makes you wonder, like, based on the way Tora looks, like, how long has he been down there already?
It's awful.
That image just kills me.
Right. And then you see, like, in contradistinction, Lily does this great contrast. You know, Tora's sitting there dirty in the dirt and in the puddle. And then you see him looking through the bars, and Vincent's there, and he's looking gorgeous. And the sky is blue. He's blonde. He's smiling while he's telling this kid this. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And, you know, he has a life of Vincent has freedom and all the power and all the joy and the happiness, and Tora is stuck there being miserable and imprisoned. And we see here again, he tried to escape. Vincent says, if you try to escape again, you know what'll happen to you. Who knows what happened to Tora? Oh my God, I don't want to know what happened when he tried to escape.
Well, and then we hear 𝗙𝗧, who's just like, Dad, you know, where are you? What are we doing? And hey, where's Tora? I want him to come to the beach. You know, so 𝗙𝗧 doesn't get what's happening. He doesn't even understand. And he's like, bummer, Tora's not coming. You know, so obviously Tora and 𝗙𝗧 are friends, but he doesn't realize what his dad's doing to him.
Right. I think this also tells us very much so that Vincent shelters 𝗙𝗧 from a lot of the underbelly of his business and what he does. And I think this also gives us some idea about how Vincent has manipulated Tora over the years in trying to make him feel part of the family, but yet at the same time reminding him that he's really not.
It doesn't seem like Tora has another family from, you know, at least from this point on. And to have like this on off, yes, you're part of the family, but no, you're not worth it. Yes, you're not. It's worse, I think, than having nobody and you know, you have a clear relationship established. This is like psychological torture. I love you so much, but I'm punishing for your own good.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's manipulation at its finest. And like you're saying, it's psychological torture.
Right. And one of the things for me, as soon as I read this, so the first thought I actually had when reading this was I was like, oh, this is like a trope. You know, you're explaining the thug's behavior because of the tortured background. But I mean, I should, you know, at this point, I know like this unfortunately does happen to people. So it's not just like something that you use for drama. But my first thought when reading this was like, if I knew that somebody had this background, I would be like, okay, I would be extremely cautious if getting into a relationship with this kind of person. And this is, again, totally tainted, like totally from my own experience, because my husband had a pretty abusive background, and we were both unaware of how much it would affect him as he grew up, whatever. I met him when he was already an adult, but none of us could predict how much it would affect him. And I now understand that this kind of trauma, especially at Tora's age, like a 5-year-old or something like that, I'm the level of emotional health that I see from Tora throughout the rest of the episodes is far more than I would expect based on how he's being treated at this age.
Right. Well, right. And we'll find out why later on. Yeah. I don't want to say anything or spoil anything.
Yeah. Going forward, we will see other factors that come into his life that I think help that.
Right. Yeah. So here we see Tora. You know, Tora is back in the present, and he's covering his face with both of his hands. So sad. And he's like, you know, I'm not scared, like hell I'm not. And admitting, you know, he actually, I think, vocalizes this out loud. And you see like the sweat and like the huff of breath where he, you know, just had this really violent act, and he himself is like gutted by it.
Yeah. And really this is where we see, you know, Tora is having these flashbacks. They're not just memories. I mean, he's physically distraught, you can tell. And you know, of course, the first thing that he thinks about after he has that memory is Poppy and saying that she dodged a bullet. She has no idea, obviously, what she's gotten herself into. And I think a lot of people initially were confused, like, what do you mean she dodged a bullet? If you go back earlier into the episode, we see that Tora has involved himself after distancing himself from clan affairs. And now all of a sudden he's like, okay, I'm in on this. Now I'm going to find this notebook thing for you, but I'm going to make it look like I just got involved for the money. But really, and we find this out later on, that he was going to give it to Martin and his boys. And my guess is that Tora is trying to limit the number of people who know about this notebook, who know what's going on with it, because he doesn't want it to get back to Poppy, because he knows exactly the type of people that he's in the clan with. He knows exactly the kind of things that they would do to her.
To protect her.
You know, that's also why he has that flashback at that point, because that was a point where his innocence was destroyed. And he's worried about that for Poppy.
Agreed.
He does time and again. He's very, very, he's like a true knight in shining armor. Like he really is very protective of the people underneath him and people who are more innocent and sheltered and more weak than him.
Well, I see him as a true anti-hero.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
What do you mean by anti-hero? I'm just curious to hear you
Well, an
develop that one.
anti-hero is someone who does bad things but is a good person.
Hmm.
He has good motivations. He has a good heart. He may do dark things and he may do bad things, but he has a good heart and he has true motivations and he has a true north. And so there are good things within him and he ultimately wants what's best overall morally, but he does bad things to get there sometimes.
Right. And I've also noticed that there is this pattern with anti-heroes, is that there's an element of lack of choice in a lot of areas.
Oftentimes, yes. Like, for example, the Punisher. I mean,
Right.
he's like a dark, dark anti-hero. He probably has a choice with some of the extremes that he goes to, but he's put in this situation because of what was done to his family, because of, the extremes that the government went to hurt him and his family, because they're trying to kill him. So he has to go to these extremes to kind of, one, get his vengeance, and two, clear his name, and three, get these bad people out of control. But he
Yeah.
ultimately is a moral, good, honorable man, but he does bad things. He kills people,
Yeah.
but he is the hero.
Yeah, and when you belong to an organization like this clan, I mean, they don't play like, they have rules and structure, don't get me wrong, but they don't have rules of engagement, if that makes sense. They don't have this, there's no tribunal. Your tribunal is getting your throat slit in Vincent's office. That's what happens. He's judge, jury, and executioner. So you have to play the game that plays you. And so for Tora, he has to do these these sorts of acts. Like, he beat the crap out of those guys, and ultimately his actions led to their death. But he did it in service of protecting Poppy.
Well, yeah, and he has to do it to survive. But I
Right.
truly believe that this is not the life he wants.
No, of
He
course
has a
not.
heart of morality, and if he could, he would probably get out, but he'd probably get killed. So
Yeah.
I don't think that that's his nature. Obviously we saw that
No.
when he stepped out of the boardroom, he was. I think we're seeing some PTSD.
Oh,
And
yeah, I'm
this
beginning
is
to
not
suspect
what
it
he
myself.
wants.
Right. And it's interesting because you mentioned about the shoes. So it shows that Lily shows us that those are brand new shoes. And like you said, Patty, they're white. So he's been distancing himself. He wants to start a new beginning, symbolized by those shoes. And as soon as he tries, boom, blood all over them, back to that way of life, no control, violence once more.
Yeah, he gets sucked back into it even when he tries to pull away.
Yeah.
Man, that reminds me of the line in The Godfather when the Godfather tries to go straight in the third movie, and he's like, every time I try to get out, they pull me back in.
Yep.
Right. And one of the things that, this is something that's going to be a major focus of this whole cartoon. And I'm very, very excited to see what is going to happen with this, with Tora trying to get out. Anywho, so back to the cartoon, we see that and now it goes away from Tora and we're back to Poppy. And Poppy's walking the streets. Yeah. Her jeans are torn. She's wearing Tora's sweatshirt and she looks pooped. She looks very tired. And, she's thinking about all that she has to do. She has a lunch meeting tomorrow with a potential investor. It's late. She is berating herself. Why didn't she think before dashing to the police station? Why am I so impulsive? And then she's just piling on this like guilt and all of the emotional stress from the day. How am I going to go to bed tomorrow? All that perverted a-hole's fault, pulling her hair. And she's having this breakdown.
I love how she just has a total meltdown. Like, that was so relatable because I know, especially with the week I've had this week, I was that was me, Poppy, pulling out my hair. Like, what the hell is this life? And so I think that's one of the things I love about Lily is she makes Poppy so relatable and just she's not the perfect little princess. She has emotions. She stuffs them down, but like at some point you have a breaking point, and this was her breaking point. And I find it really funny. and I'm going to get a little ahead of myself again, but like she's sitting there admonishing herself for being impulsive. And then she sees this cat in the tree. And what does she do? She's like, oh, I got to go rescue it. Like, how impulsive is that?
Mom's an
Well,
old broken.
it's so adorable.
Right. And it shows us her very sweet nature. You know, even though she's having
Yeah.
a rough day, she sees this cat, this creature, and she cares about it enough to risk, you know, put herself in danger to rescue it. She's a very sweet person.
Yeah. And y'all notice that that cat has yellow rimmed eyes?
Oh my
are you
God.
saying like,
Yeah. My friend Tiff, she's got this really good theory, and I hope I don't butcher it because I wanted to bring it up during the podcast. So kudos to Tiff for this one. But she, during this whole scene where Poppy sees this cat, she was like, is this cat Tora?
symbolic? So
In
she's
theory. Right. Like, is she going to rescue him? And the thing that stuck with me here is that, you know, you might have climbed up there on your own, but you can't get back down on your own.
Great
So
symbolism.
that made me think of, right. So that made me think of Tora in the sense of you may have gotten yourself in to this clan business, but you can't be the only one helping you get yourself out.
Yeah.
then, you know,
So,
then we see she climbs up to rescue it, but then she also needs rescuing herself. So I think that if we're going to go along
yeah.
the route, they both need each other to help each other.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so she's climbing up the tree, right? She sees the branches cracking, and you know she has this determined look on her face, and she says it's been a hot minute since she's climbed the tree, which shows us that she has some childhood experience with that. And now we pan to Tora. Tora is talking to 𝗪𝗀, whatever, everyone pronounces it differently, and asking him about the background check. And he's, you know, 𝗪𝗀 clearly has just said, why don't you ask her? And Tora, again, is responding to something that, you know, everyone knows about him. Should I be flattered that you think so highly of my charm? Because 𝗪𝗀 obviously knows that he has a way with the ladies.
Yep. We've seen it.
And yeah, and then he's just telling him, oh, I drove to some random neighborhood to get food, the one with a ton of, and then he like pauses. He's like, cook.
That is one of my favorite panels in this whole thing,
Yeah.
when he peeks over and whoop, sees her. He's like,
Yeah.
what on earth? It's so
And
cute.
notice, like, I don't know if this was on purpose, but you know, notice how he's in the dark in that first panel, and then when he sees Poppy, the panels turn warm
Yes.
and bright.
That is so true. Wow, I love these little observations. Yeah, and
oh
he
God, panel.
You gotta
This one
be
of Poppy
effing kidding
climbing
me.
the tree. Yeah.
This is like something that's so far out of his world. For somebody to just show concern for an animal is something that shocks him. He's not used to seeing that.
Well, and she's so
Right.
pretty. I mean, just look at her with that kitty.
Yeah. You can't help yourself. And I mean, even the panel where you only see her silhouette, that's one of my favorite panels in this comic.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not gonna lie, it just, you see the city lights in the background and the tree, and you see the little cat, and I'm like, oh, it's so
Beautiful.
breathtaking. Love it. I just had to fangirl over that for a minute.
Yeah.
And this little innocent whip
That is my favorite.
Tora has.
Absolute
I love it.
Favorite.
Oh,
And then he drops the grocery bag filled with, come on, ladies, strawberry juice.
yep. Like, how childlike and charming is this? You know, right before we see him find her, he's like, "Oh, you think so highly of my charm," and then he flips around, and it's like he's this little kid. I love it. And you know, Poppy's climbing a tree.
These two.
And I'm like, oh my God, this is gonna be so adorable. I can't wait.
Yep. And it's funny that you mentioned like her being highlighted against the city. You know, we know that she sees herself very much as like a girl from the country, and everyone else in the city is looking by this cat. They haven't even noticed. It's like it's a usual stereotype of like city people being busy and hurried, and she's the one who took notice of this cat and is coming to rescue it. And then, of course, the branch starts cracking, and there's a panel to her eyes, just looking, and he immediately drops his bag with food, and we see some strawberry juice in there in the bag, and runs. You know, she's falling down. He's running like really fast, and he's there when she falls. His arms are there to catch her, and he catches her.
Like, that was one of my favorite panels ever. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so gorgeous. And like, I don't know. I usually go for the in-depth analysis and all of that. You guys know I'm a fan of that, but this is just like, it just captures my heart. I have nothing else to say other than that.
Yeah, him was just so heartwarming, and it just was a moment of, I don't know how else to say it without going too gushing, but it was just purely romantic.
Yeah, he doesn't have to think for a second. He's drawn to her enough that as soon as he sees her falling, he just drops everything instinctively and runs to catch her.
I mean, is it weird to say white knight?
Right. Absolutely. And then I love, like, after the whole thing happens, like, clearly she came down with enough force to knock him over. And she's just like thinking she's in a dream. The cat is just like, hey, thanks for saving me. Bye.
And she's like, oh, this is so snuggly.
Right. I'm not going to lie. I kind of want to know how Tora, because, like, obviously we figure out that she's laying on his chest and she's snuggling against his chest. I really want to know how much he was internally screaming as she's snuggling against his chest, because you know he was.
Yeah, he's laid out on the ground and she's all splayed out on top of him. And he's probably like, oh my God.
Actually, I was wondering about that, because I see her point of view is down on the ground, like you see the cat walking away. I didn't quite realize that they had fallen to the ground. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, so she's probably laying on his chest just like, this is great. I mean, I know I would feel that way.
Right? Amen. Amen, sister. And she's like, oh, I'm in bed. I feel so warm and snuggly. So you know he's like his own space heater.
Gosh.
Wow. Sorry. I'm totally going off into gutter mode here. Sorry, guys.
Y'all, it's Tora. How do we help ourselves?
Lily, this is all your fault.
I will say, I tell my husband and my friends who think I'm obsessed with Tora, I was like, in all my fantasies, Tora is never mine. Tora is Poppy's. I might go crazy with
Tora and not mine forever.
Yeah, they are adorable. It was so funny. She's like, oh, maybe this is a dream. And then the last thing we see is, you're not dreaming.
Yes, I know. Perfect ending. Dun, dun, dun.
Oh, man. That was such a good cliffhanger. Especially, like, I have to say, like, the one thing that made me so glad that this was included in this episode, the one with Vincent, is that we ended on a high note.
Yes.
We needed that relief and that release. Like, it was just, because it was really intense early on. And I think that just speaks to Lily's writing abilities and her story flow so much. Like, she knows when we need relief.
Well, she's so good at pace. And I have to say, I mean, I've read a lot of webtoons, and she invests in her story. Yes. And she pours so much life into each episode. And so, yeah, sometimes they might be late, but I would rather wait and get this quality than not. You know, I mean, she's incredible.
Amen. Amen to that. I don't care if I have to be up till like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I will wait.
I will wait.
Yep.
Oh, goodness. So it was such a good episode. Like, I love going back and rereading these and, you know, looking at it with new and fresh eyes. I know I said this last time, but it's just a different experience every time.
Thank you so much to my current patrons: Suzie, LadyLibris, Lily, Jenny, Molly, Veronica, Emily, Jo Rochelle, Saucy Tuggles, Ann Rose, Alexa, Misty, Joanne, Imelda, Esther, 𝗪𝗏𝗄𝐺𝑖 People, Emily, Jean, Jen, Erin, Kate, Lily, Beckett, Miranda, Christine, Sadie, Kelly, Teresa, Mrs. Castaldo, Tatiana, Louisa, and Rachel. Your support is truly appreciated.